Hi, I'm Eric Ciampoli, your host at Manufacturing Roundtable. Today we are joined by Torrence Smith, a seasoned operations leader and West Point graduate who has led major manufacturing turnarounds and digital transformation projects. He brings deep experience in lean manufacturing, Six Sigma, and continuous improvement across a wide range of industries. I hope you find this conversation useful. Let's jump in. Hi, everyone. I'm your host, Eric Ciampoli, the host of Manufacturing Roundtable. And today we have our wonderful guest, Torrence Smith, who has an amazing background. He's a West Point veteran with over 20 years of experience leading transformation and technology and manufacturing processes, which is quite a feat. He successfully led 4 turnarounds, reducing lead times by 70% and delivered multiples of millions in savings over 8, implemented ERP systems alongside with multiple other digital applications for modern manufacturing environments. And Torrence has managed P&L responsibility of up to 100 million and teams of over 400 people, which is a lot of responsibility. Thank you for joining us today, Torrence.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So let's get right into it. So tell me about who you are, where you came from, and how you got here.
Well, that's kind of broad, but sure, I can do that.
Super broad.
Super broad. I'm a native Minnesotan. And so if you can hear that in my voice, sometimes I might say something weird like a boot, or something like that. That's where that comes from. Went to the Service Academy, spent 5 years on active duty in the Army. So I was stationed in Germany and then later on in Honduras. And then afterwards, spent a number of years, first half of my career really, in manufacturing, operations, and continuous improvement. About 12 years ago, I pivoted to applying the same skills to digital transformation. So at that point, was involved in launching a number of software applications. Later on, an ERP implementation, a global trade management software, and then in my last several roles, served as an IT project manager.
Fantastic. So you and I spoke not too long ago, and we shared some war stories of manufacturing and adoption of technology, change management, and all those things that make our jobs extremely exciting. So you shared with me some fantastic stories, and I'd love for you to share that with our guests here.
Wow. Well, so maybe I start with kind of talking about those turnarounds and kind of what they had in common. I think probably the biggest thing is you walk into a situation, and many times, no one's really sat down and thoughtfully figured out how the business functions. They've never really sat down and thought about kind of what their flywheel is, right? So if you look at Amazon, Amazon has an established flywheel. Essentially, what they do is they try and generate increasing volume, and by increasing the volume, they're able to lower their costs, and then they just kind of repeat that over and over again. So, the first flywheel was actually in a business that I owned with my partner, my spouse, and so that was a printing company, and so it was looking at something as basic as, what's the standard within the industry? Well, the standard within the industry was a 14-day lead time. So as soon as we changed that and figured out how to get that down to under 3 days, well, then we had a market. My second role, leading a turnaround was S&Z. I'm sorry, not S&Z. It was North Coast Spring and Wire, and that was a little bit different. That was a job shop again, but it was a process where many of those steps were 2 to 3 steps long. So where normally as an operations superintendent or a continuous improvement lead, you're trying to figure out where the constraint is. Well, the constraint was actually in the setup men, because you only had so many of those, and you're trying to run as many jobs as possible, and they're the technical expertise, but sometimes they're also running the job itself. So it's a separate instance. Worked at a carrier HVAC plant where we had, I'm trying to remember, it was either 8 or 11 separate production lines. So, on some, the product was the size of your forearm. In other ones, it was the length of your car. So it was figuring out how do you manage all of those as a single entity, right? How do you get them to function uh, um, as a single business? We tried dollars, we tried units shipped, and it was just chaos. So that one was really focusing on measurement, specifically cost standard hours, which is what engineering said it would take to build those individual products. And once you figured out what each assembly line would produce in cost standard hours on a daily basis, now all of a sudden you had something that was predictable.
So, how does something like that in a manufacturing environment, in your opinion, help owners and managers make smart decisions?
Yeah, good question. So I think many times we have, financial statements, which everyone in business agrees, is you have generally accepted accounting principles, and that's fine for an overall view of the business, but you can't actually manage with that. What you need is really a model of what your production should look like. So, many times on the IT side or the data side, they talk about a single source of truth, right? So you're trying to do that same thing within manufacturing. You want to try and create a single source of truth that everybody understands. Like, here's kind of how we do things. Here's where we make our money, and here's where we need to focus. So operationally, it may be something as simple as having a value stream map. And over a larger company or a business with a number of processes, that might look something more like order to cash. So you're mapping that. It might be in some third party processes in your business. Maybe you're sending things out for things like paint or coat
Oh
or
yeah,
demagna.
or like the favorite one there is like if you're doing anodization or you have to have some type of like surface coating hardness, those lead times
Yes,
just kill you.
absolutely. But you got to map it all the way across that process because, that's even though it's not happening within your four walls, you're accountable for it. So order to cash forces you to look at the entire process from end to end. And once you do that, you get a pretty good picture. And then you realize that a lot of the things that you're like, oh, this was the conversation you and I had just a few days ago. Like, oh, look at this efficiency I achieved by, speeding up this machine or, reducing setup. And when you look at it from the order to cash point of view, the impact was maybe small or maybe there actually wasn't one.
Yeah, or the opposite. Now you've consumed more raw material and you've actually you now have less stock and less assets, but yet you're still waiting for cash because you've done so good at one step. You still didn't ship it yet. You're not there yet. So that's part of that continuous improvement. You solve one problem at a time until the cash gets closer to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so it's having a global view, you know. There's a guy named Paul Graham who started Y Combinator, which funds, business startups. And he had something that he really focused on. He even put it in an essay, and he called it, I think, Founder's View was what he called it. But essentially, he said that the benefit that you have as a founder many times is you do have a global view. You think about more than just the financial statement, you're thinking about how the processes work within your business and then the third party processes that you have to count on. But once you have that view and you've kind of got it documented and you can assign a number. So as an example, one company I worked at that was a recycling business, the order to cash was about 96 days. And once you had the data set and you kind of put it in front of people and you could kind of see all their eyes kind of light up like, oh, okay, so that's how it works. Because until then, no one had actually sat down and looked at that, you know. I don't know if you have that experience
Every time I do one.
every time you do one. Yeah. Yeah. And so you go, oh, well, this vendor is cheaper, right? Like, DMAG or plating. I found a guy that's cheaper. Now, he might be cheaper by a couple pennies or a couple dollars, but what's his lead time, right? Your first vendor, maybe his lead time was a week, right? In a week, you get your product back. And this other vendor that's slightly cheaper, maybe his is 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Well, you might have had a better deal with the first guy.
Yeah, because now you have another week of materials sitting in flux, waiting to ship, or for the processes that's depending on them,
Yeah, you've figured out how to tie up a week's worth of inventory,
which could be a lot of dollars.
which can be a lot of dollars. Yeah.
So, in some of these turnarounds, what would you say is one of your key takeaways from leading these turnarounds? Like, we talked about the other day, mindset, people's, their perspective into business, some of these theoretical, theory of constraints conversations. What would you say is your biggest takeaway from leading these turnarounds?
One of my biggest takeaways is definitely that you also need to be a teacher. You know, many times you're trying to figure out, like, why isn't this guy excited? Why isn't he, getting behind the change? And the fact of the matter is just he doesn't understand what you're talking about, right? You've got this picture in your mind of what the business is supposed to look like, and all these great things are going to happen. What he's really wondering is, okay, what's going to be the impact on my job, right? And then if you're not trying to eliminate my job, maybe you're trying to get me to work harder, which I'm not really excited about that either. So you really have to, it's not just having a plan, right, and gathering data from people. That's good. But then you have to kind of bring people along. So you're coaching as you go. You're explaining what this. It's sort of like when you buy you buy a puzzle, right? And it comes in the box, and there's a picture on the box. But if the person can't see the picture, then it just looks like a bunch of parts.
Yeah, big mess.
It's just a big mess, right? And so you're going to have to kind of explain to them what it looks like. In a perfect world, you can actually say, well, here's what it looks like, right? You show them a diagram. This is what it's going to look like at the end. Here's all the great things that are going to happen, right? And they need to understand that all that expediting that they think is part of their job, it isn't really a part of their job. It's a sign that you have a broken process.
Yeah. If you have too many heroes, there's something wrong with the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And that really their value isn't in being able to expedite orders. Their value is being part of the intellectual property of the business. In other words, here's somebody that knows that step of the business really, really well. Plus, he knows the history of why the process is designed the way it is today. Like, here's all the different ways that we attempted and failed to get this to work. That's valuable.
Yes. Yes, I love those conversations. Oh, we tried that stuff years ago and it didn't work. And I'm like, oh, please entertain me. What didn't work? Oh, none of it worked. Did anyone use it? What do you mean? Did you just say, oh, yeah, look what we did? Or is it, what are we still doing? Because most of the time, as you've probably seen, continuous improvement for many organizations is a 5S program that gets celebrated, and that was the end of it. And they like, well, what's the next step? It isn't about what can we do now. It's what do we do for the next X number of years of our business to change the way we service our customers so that our customers choose us.
Ideally, yeah, that would be great. And then there's the huge kit bag, right? You have some people that say, well, we're really into lean. And then other people say, we're really into Six Sigma. And other people say, we're into the theory of constraints. And somebody else says, well, it's really about design thinking. And then someone else says, well, there's generally approved management practices that you get like in the MBA programs. And that's really the answer. The truth is you can use all of them. You can use all of them. And then within your business, you're going to combine them to get the best version. And then it needs to be dynamic. Things that you couldn't afford before. Like you say, oh, well, we're going to put a TV in the break room and it's a flat screen and it's going to take up the whole wall. And we're going to put the production numbers in there just so that people can watch. Well, Not so long ago, a flat screen TV was a couple $1,000s, and someone would say, "Well, I don't know if it's worth it." Right? Nowadays, you can get a 55-inch TV for, two, $300. Well, now all of a sudden, it's not that big a deal. So the cost of innovation just continues to go down. To kind of date myself, I remember once discussing with the quality manager of our company about how we should respond to our customers with email instead of sending them faxes, and he thought that was just a terrible idea and it would never work.
Wow. And now emails become a burden where, oh God, email, we're going to send messages over text or Slack or, oh gosh, or Teams messages.
Yeah, we need a different way. We need a portal.
Yeah, it's funny how sometimes the introduction of technology, then later that solution then becomes the constraint.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, what we're asking employees to do is kind of fundamentally different than what we had them do before. Because when I say that they're like the intellectual property of the business, many times they truly are. You say, well, and I actually had this happen. I was talking to a guy named Dell, and Dell was like, well, I don't have a degree. And I started out, working on the oil field. And, now I'm working in product data management. And to me, that was just a wonderful thing because he understood how things got applied in the field, not just what happened within the factory. And I recall explaining to him, well, I've got this issue where operations in the field, as soon as they saw a part number for a new product, they would order it. And we hadn't even built it yet. And I'm like, I need a solution for how to get them to stop doing that. What do you think? And he says, well, this might not apply, but you can actually come up with a generic part number. And then in the bill of materials is actually all the part numbers in the description of what it is. And if we have a generic part number, then they can't really tell what it is that we're building. And, to him, it was no big deal, right? It was unconscious competence. It was something that he took for granted that everybody knew. And the fact of the matter is, not everybody knew it.
Yeah, and it's amazing how you'll see sometimes there's a targeted individual who's a high value individual. Sometimes get branded as an obstacle, but yet they are the what I call the invisible hand of the organization. Now, if they go missing, things don't function without them, but they just seem to know everything, everywhere, everyone, and how to just magically make things happen. It's not good that they're the constraint, but that's the guy I want to talk to. Hey, Mr. Invisible Hand or Mrs. Invisible Hand, help me solve this problem so that not everything revolves around you. But don't worry, we have more important things because you have the big picture. We need to solve the fact that everything revolves around you because that's not good. You go on vacation and we're calling you. That's not good. Let's fix this.
I think of it this way, right? Instead of replacing you, we're going to try and extend your influence,
Yeah. Well, you're
because,
important, but not the
yeah,
way you used to be.
not the way you used to be. I want to build a system around you, right? So that we're not calling you on the weekend. Instead, maybe we're having you actually talk to customers, right?
Yeah.
Or we're going to have you talk to vendors, right? Or we're going to have you come into management meetings. In the past, right, you were in the back office and you weren't really allowed to do that, right? Maybe other people were taking credit for your work. Now we want you to take credit for your work,
Mhm.
right? And so we want you to explain to senior management why the direction that we're choosing is correct, right? Or why something that was proposed needs to be modified, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to take. So here's an important thing: is we're not going to take credit for their work, right? We're going to let them take credit for their work, and we're going to kind of publicize their competence. But we're going to
Fantastic.
ask them to get involved, right, in what the next phase is.
Absolutely.
We're going to ask them to help design it. We want you to help us design what the future is going to look like,
There's a lot of
right?
knowledge on the shop floor.
Yeah, there's a lot of knowledge on the shop floor, especially if you have a small engineering department or no engineering department. then all of a sudden, your operators and that kind of organizational knowledge, that really is your engineering, your engineering department. That really is your intellectual property. So then
Absolutely
why
is.
would you let that go? So many times, their resistance to continuous improvement is because they're wondering if, oh, you're just going to write all this stuff down and then you don't need me.
Mm.
Because there's a fundamental paradigm, especially with theory of constraints, is if I can find the main constraint of the business and I can break that, now all of a sudden I can have the same facility, the same number of people, the same number of fixed cost, but maybe I can ship 30%, 50%, 100% more product in the same month.
Mhm.
Yeah. So same number of people shipping twice as much product. And then if you've got the process kind of smoothed out, they're not working any harder than they were before. There's just
Yeah.
less slack time. So we're not asking them to kind of sprint through their day. We actually want them to kind of work at something like a steady walk, And then here's where automation comes in, is you want to use the technology then to remove the friction.
Mhm.
So, you're very familiar with the Toyota production system and lean, right?
Yes.
So it's Jidoka, it's autonomation,
Mhm.
it's taking an operator and extending what their capability is, so that one person can function like three people. And oh, by the way, good idea if you pay them more, right? So the trade off is you're going to hire less people, right? But you're going to pay the people that you have more, and you're going to document your process. And then, in a perfect world, right, you're going to allow them to enjoy some of the benefits now of this more profitable business. Maybe there's like some sort of employee stock program, right? Maybe there's some sort of bonus program. Maybe there's an increased number of paid days off. So you're kind of creating that environment where now that this employee is more valuable, it's the impact of losing them is higher. So you want to take turnover and push it all the way down to zero.
Mhm. So, Terrence, and all your learnings and knowledge, how do you combine Lean Six Sigma, theory of constraints, and other lean tools like Hoshin Conry in addressing these challenges in an organization?
I think it's just kind of subject to whatever the situation is that you're trying to resolve, right? One place where Six Sigma works really good is in quality, right? Because essentially it's a statistical process, you know. So before you're going to go and try and increase your throughput, be really smart to resolve all your quality defects first, right? You drive all those out of the process, all your special cause issues in a perfect world, right? Those are gone. Maybe even some of your kind of common cause issues. And then, I really like to lean into the theory of constraints for these. I'm kind of trying to remember the Japanese word, but basically your rapid improvement.
Oh, Kaizen.
Well, yeah, maybe it is Kaizen. Um, I thought it was like it's not Kairetsu because that's uh, Kaiketsu. I forget. Anyways, so you're going to kind of attack this rapid enterprise level improvement, right? So maybe you're going to reduce lead time by 30% or 50% or 70%. It's going to be kind of a shock to the system though, for the people that are in the business, because now all of a sudden they used to have, a couple hours a day maybe where they were really kind of not doing a lot. And I'm not putting that on them, right? But they're saying, wow, all of a sudden I'm not sprinting, but kind of all my slack time is mostly gone. And oh, by the way, here's this process where we used to do everything by hand. Um, now I don't know if we can keep up doing it like that, right? So now, as the change agent, they're coming to you and saying, we've got to do something about this.
Yeah, they need help.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. that the Toyota production system and lean does exceedingly well. Like lean is a production system from end to end, right? So, how you handle inventory, how you label inventory, water spiders, um, work in process, visual controls, those are all the things that are native to lean, that when you're trying to sustain your gains, it becomes essential. It's very difficult to sustain them without that, because lean is kind of this repeatable kata, right? I mean, you're doing your one-on-ones. You're bringing people, through the process. You're getting their feedback. You're engaging them. You're really using questioning to get them to educate you, right? And at some point, it becomes this mutual learning process. Um, and then you're looking at them to help you figure out what the next breakthrough should be, because they live in the process. Many times they see things that you either don't see or you take for granted. And they go, oh no, it's really important, right? This material comes back and it's got this sheet on it. And they fill out the sheet, and these two boxes here are what's really important because it tells you, what temperature they pickled it at, or what the batch numbers are, or whatever, right? So, you know, uh, them as the intellectual property of the business. Now you can engage them through lean, right, to find that next breakthrough,
Yeah, the next aha moment and something to celebrate.
the next aha moment. Absolutely.
So, Terrence, moving on to the next subject is, can you share a success story from a digital transformation or ERP implementation?
Yeah, probably the first big digital transformation that I was involved in was working at a forklift company, and our major customer was Home Depot. We had, I believe it was 400 different dealers nationwide that were servicing the Home Depot stores, and the forklift equipment that was on site. So the process was handled with email mail merges, Excel spreadsheets, manual updates, this very painful, labor intensive, inaccurate process. We really had no visibility of what the dealers were doing. And, the dealers had no visibility of their service technicians, right? They would just say, well, he's a good guy and he works hard. And I'm sure he did well, right? He did right by the customer. So the entire process was really email and phone calls. Um, it was very unstructured. I'll say it that way. So, sitting down with uh, the account manager, Mark, and then saying, well, you know what? Maybe there's a way to automate this. So essentially, we mapped the entire process from end to end, and then figured out what pieces of information we needed to capture. And then we had a native software development team that was in Michigan. And between them and our third party vendors, we were able to build an application around those requirements where we had a digital platform we called One Call, which integrated to Home Depot, which allowed us to see all those check ins of the dealers when they got on site, gather all the data on how long it took them to respond, how long it took them to get on site, how long it took them to resolve the issue, which parts were used, what the cost was, etc. And so now we went from having zero visibility to having 100% visibility essentially for all those dealers, and then being able to pull that data into Power BI to create individual scorecards for each of them. So it completely changed the conversation, right? It went from, "Oh, my guy is a good dude. You can't say that he dropped the ball on that," to, "Well, here's your data.
Yeah, what's the fundamental about process improvement, right? You can't improve what you don't measure.
Can't improve what you don't measure," right? So it totally changes the relationship, right? And so now you're trying to figure out, like, which dealers do I maybe give more territory to, right? Which dealers do I consider replacing? It totally changes the conversation.
Yeah. Information is such a powerful thing. Having it versus not having it allows you to make informed decisions. I used to have a poor belief that, information and ERP systems. They're just minutia. They're stuff. Like, we need to get the work done, because I never really saw how they connected, because a lot of the places I was working with didn't really adopt these technology platforms. They were only using the financial model. So at the end of the month, you got a report of how well you did. So we don't really know, other than my manual KPI sheets, to say, hey, how many widgets did you bang out today? Did you meet your 500 piece goal? Or you're like, what happened and why are you not there? And as they've started to see the real, they've adopted it, and now it's actually showing. You can pull up a dashboard and see how close you are to hitting on time delivery for the day. It's like, that's profound. Did you know by 12 o'clock, hey, you know what, we're not going to make it, we need to make a shift, or we need to let customers know things aren't going to happen the way we planned it on, instead of, oh yeah, sorry, Mr. Customer, it didn't go out yesterday, I know you really need it, but my bad. Those are horrible conversations to have, because they, they're so avoidable. All of them are avoidable.
All of them are avoidable. I mean, yeah, it's new, right? And you still see it though on a daily basis, right? They're trying to figure out like, okay, it was big data, right? And then it's almost like in some instances they have too much data. So then it becomes a question of which data is really important.
Yeah. Thousands of reports, and you only need one or two, and they, managers come and go, they create a report, and then their replacement starts getting it, they just delete it every day, and you see the system like, what is all this data for? Like, because I always have this, the saying is like, you only need the data that's required to make the decisions that you need to make. If you have extra stuff, it clouds your, too much information can get you lost.
Yeah, I mean, it really takes you back to that flywheel, right? So, operationally, you don't manage a plant on dollars, right? I mean, it's parts per hour, it's completed assemblies, it's work orders going to inventory, etc. you know? But if you have a kind of a higher level understanding of what the business model looks like and kind of what the choke points are, where the values, created, and as you alluded to, right, you have these third party outside vendors. You really have to understand what the flow is through them as well.
Yeah, it's important. And when something goes wrong, what is that impact? And if you have a plus or minus 6 weeks lead time from a vendor, you need to be prepared for that, not responding to it, because one day it will happen. It's not if it happens, it's when. Because just like every other manufacturing company, things happen. And then their vendors don't always deliver. So you got to understand that, so that you could plan accordingly. You may want to, you may have a meeting about making a tough choice to add a lot of inventory so that you're always on time, and you balance that out. Well, how much on time do we want to be? Okay, I can't afford 100% on time, but I can put an extra 20,000 in the buffer, so if they're a day or two late, not everybody goes late. So you pick and choose, right?
Amen. Well, I mean, here's the thing too, right? Is sometimes they say, oh, it's plus or minus 6 weeks. That's a really big swing, right? And you say, well, so why do you say plus or minus 6 weeks? And you say, well, uh, uh, it's this number if you deliver, it's this other number if we have to come pick up. You go, well, we only have so many guys and so many trucks, and oh, okay, well, so then what's the lead time if we always deliver? Like, we will bring it to you as soon as we finish. We will bring it to you. We'll do the paperwork. We'll even if you want, do some sort of ASN or some sort of digital thing where we email you like, "Hey, it's ready and it's done and we delivered it." What's the lead time then, right? And they go, "Oh, well, if you can do that, the lead time's 3 weeks." Sometimes they're giving you these long lead times because they don't want to tell you, but it's because you're a problem. It's because you say that you're going to deliver, and then later on you call up and you say, "We can't do it. You'll have to come and get it." Right? Or it's, yes, you deliver, but you deliver without including the paperwork, right? Or you give them paper, but they have a digital system now, and so everything has to be keyed in, and they got a guy that does that, but he does that in addition to his other four jobs. So it's really drilling down into what the reasoning is, because many times they're just trying to protect themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the last thing you want to do is overpromise and underdeliver.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And maybe you have something written into your contracts where they're gonna get punished.
Yep. That's the construction world.
That's the construction world. I mean, when I was a cadet, right? I was 19, and I had to lead, two other freshmen, right? We called them plebes. And in the beginning, my leadership approach was, if you make a mistake, I'm going to yell at you, right? And that worked okay, right? But not very well. Then when I became a junior and I had more people under me, I said, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write you up. Every time you make a mistake, I'm going to get you that way, right? And that worked all right, but it was leadership by fear, right? Then when I became a senior, I decided, maybe if a guy does something wrong, yeah, I might write him up. But what I really want is to figure out what it is he wants, right? Because not only am I leading people that are younger than me, I'm also leading my classmates, right? And then yelling at them and writing them up isn't going to work really well.
Nope. You'll get pockets of resistance.
You get pockets of resistance. And see, this is the conversation you and I had last time we talked, right? Is somebody says, yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to use the machine. Yes, yes, yes. And they're just checking their watch, wondering when you're going to leave. And then they're going to put it back in storage, right? So then the question becomes, what's in it for me, right? What's in it for me? Do you have some ulterior motive, right? Maybe as soon as I say yes, and you implement this thing, you're planning on getting rid of me, even though you said that you weren't, So there's a matter of trust, right? And then are you building your systems so that somebody can make a mistake and it's still going to be all right? If they know for sure that you're gonna punish them, then they won't tell you the truth. And if you can't get the truth, then it's hard to improve.
Yeah. You're going to guess, and then you're not going to get buy in because you're solving the wrong problem.
You're solving the wrong problem.
So, in likeness of this conversation, how do you keep teams motivated and aligned during a large scale change, something that's not a quick Kaizen event?
Yeah, it's tough. Large scale changes. For instance, I was working at a recycler where we're putting an ERP solution in, and it took 2 years, right? And it's across, four different continents, right? You got a team in the US, you got a team in the United Kingdom, you got a team in Australia, you got a team in Singapore. So the biggest challenge then is synchronization. So um, when people don't know what to do, or when people get confused, what they do is stop. They stop and wait, right? Because they don't want to go and do the wrong thing, and oh, I made a mistake, and now we've got to rework this. So the number one thing that you can actually do is communicate. And early in my career, I used to hate when I heard that, right? Like, oh, the number one responsibility for a project manager is communication. I was like, that's wrong, right? These people don't know what it's like. But the fact of the matter is, if you don't if you don't get that information in their hands, they don't move forward with confidence, and that's what you want them to do. So it's regular updates, right? It's scheduled reports, and as dry as some of that stuff is, it's necessary. And then when you have meetings, you want to have agendas, and then you want to make sure that there's a buffer of free time where they can ask questions.
Yeah. I like to call those seminars weigh-ins, just like, if you hire a personal trainer and you did your exercise for the week and then you're going to get on the scale. Well, that's essentially what we're doing. We're doing a weigh-in. It's like, what did we lose in waste? What did we lose? And okay, anything you learned, anything you need. Do we need to come back at this and do another Kaizen because we missed something that, because, you're in a rush doing a Kaizen. You don't have 6 months to plan and execute. You got like a day or 2 days. And if you're lucky, 5 days. You can't change the entire plant in 5 days, but you can fix a process or leave part of it. What did we miss? When should we go back for a second approach? That little weigh in. Okay. A, B. Okay. Are you happy with this change? It's okay. All right, let's do it again. What else can we fix? And that's like the part that people think, oh well, when is this lean stuff over? And I'm like, never. What do you mean never? I'm like, never. Well, once we run out of things to fix, then what do we do? I'm like, if you run out of things to fix, I think you will be the first company ever to run out of problems.
Yeah. Well, and then, that's great, but that's, a good chance to coach them too, right? Like, well, okay, so let's say that we run out of problems, but because you're more efficient, right, and you have fewer defects and your customers beginning to trust you, right, you're gonna get more orders. You're gonna get more orders. Then you're gonna get a reputation, right, for being the kinda people who deliver on time and produce quality and, can be trusted to keep their word, and then you're gonna get new clients, right? So then the expectations are gonna go up. So you put the bug in their ear to kind of start thinking about, "Hey, if you had the same number of people, right, and maybe we even had the same equipment and we're in the same building, what would you do to make this more efficient?"
It's a wide open opportunity.
Wide open opportunity. And if you can shift that responsibility, right, from, oh, well, this guy comes in and he's asking all these questions that are uncomfortable. And, I have to do what he says because otherwise he's going to tell on me to the owner.
Yeah. So I have to play around that. That's when you get the while you're around, you get the yeses, and then when you leave, and he's like, "Hey, so what'd you do last week?" I had to report out. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I did stuff. What'd you do? Show me. I didn't do it. I'm not surprised. I could see it. But so let's start again. And then it's like you've got to break that mindset where change is bad. And if I'm doing something not the best way, that doesn't mean I'm wrong or I'm bad. That's a weird concept to get through. It's like whatever you're doing, it isn't wrong. It's just what you're doing. Getting better at it doesn't mean that anything you did in the past is wrong. Because I can't tell you how many times I've had the conversation where something that was done years back, and sometimes with the acceleration of technology, it's a year because something changed with automation, technology, software, where now it can be successful. So just because it didn't work before doesn't mean it won't work again. I told you about the jewelry packaging. The camera wasn't strong enough to read that little code. Now you can read it from 10 feet away and it 100% throughput, and now it works. So now the technology is good for us, and we implemented it and it was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually like to go and find that guy. Like, not every company has them, but, sometimes you have a company where there's a guy that complains all the time, right? Complains all the time. He's always saying things like, that won't work, right? He's got like a whole list of things that have been attempted and then abandoned, right? That guy is so important for me. Like, some teams will come in and go like, shut that guy up, or why haven't you fired him, or don't include him in the meeting, right? Because
I call those guys the Oracle.
yeah, the Oracle. Oh, I like that. The Oracle is probably the most valuable person in the company, right? Because if you own a business and the larger it is, the harder it is for the owner or the management team, right, to understand everything that's going on. The Oracle sees it, got involved in it, got burned, right? Is disillusioned, right? Because they had like a Kaizen, 3 years ago, and we said we were going to implement this new thing, and then we abandoned it. And he's like, you guys don't follow through on your promises, etc. Right? This guy has so much information, or gal has so much information that if somebody would just listen, and that person needs to be us. Yeah, that person needs to be us. Now, I would say that initially when you talk to them, don't start writing things down right away in front of them
Yeah, they hate notebooks.
because they hate notebooks, right? They're thinking that, oh, he's going to take notes and then they've been trying to fire me and they're going to use him to find cause to terminate me, right? But as soon as I finish talking to him and I go around the corner or I'm sitting in my car, I'm going to write down everything, everything. And I want to get to the bottom of the well, right? If he thinks that there's 50 things that are screwed up about this company and how it works, what they're doing, and what the decisions are, I want to get all 50, you know, because maybe 47 or 30 or whatever of those things he's saying are horse hockey, right? It's just he doesn't understand. But a lot of times there's like one or two, gold nuggets in that list that, I mean, he might be the secret to the entire Kaizen. This is the guy that's going to change the direction of the company.
That's why they're the oracle, because they have that knowledge. And a lot of times, those guys outlasted multiple plant managers, multiple presidents, multiple of all predecessors before them, and they know stuff. They know things that even the owner doesn't know. They are almost. Uh, I don't want to use the wrong terminology, but those individuals possess such great value, but they usually get ignored because they squeak a lot, and when you squeak enough, people stop listening to you.
Yes. Yeah, and many times too, right? Because that person doesn't have an advanced degree, or hasn't been through some sort of formal training, or maybe they had like an issue in their personal life, right? And so, they've been passed over. And then people who, potentially either A, were less competent, or maybe they were competent, but they didn't understand this specific business, right? But they still got promoted, right? They got more money. They got to move to first shift, and this guy's still on third shift, and so many times they're kind of upset, right?
Yeah, a little resentful.
They're a little resentful, and so it's not just finding that guy, right? It's you've got to turn them, right? You got to get them on your side. You got to convince them that you're not just there to take the information and let them go, or take the information and then claim it as your own, right?
Offline, I can give you a story where one of those individuals was the owner.
Oh,
This won't work. We tried that, all these things, a list of things. And I'm like, why am I here then? I'm like, I bet you $1 because I love my $1 bet. It's not about the money. It's about that monument that you can look at and say, you know what? Maybe I should change the way I think about my problems because they're not always permanent. A problem is not permanent. It's a temporary disruption to the things that you want to do.
but that's a mindset shift. That's a huge mindset shift. Is people believe that, well, it's been difficult, then it's always going to be difficult. This will always be a challenge. Nothing's going to change. And they don't understand that the world that they live in was created by people who believed they could change things. It's all built by people. It's all built by people, you know? It's so why couldn't it be them?
Hmm? List of reasons, right? Like,
List of reasons. Here's my list.
so, in closing, so do you have any key advice for manufacturers today with the obscene amounts of technology and opportunities that are available to us? I don't think history has ever seen the level of advancements at the rate that they're happening today and innovation. Any advice for those manufacturers?
Well, this is going to sound strange.
I love strange things.
I would say, uh, take about $20 out of your wallet, go to the store, and buy yourself a notebook. And the reason I say that is because the systems that are in your business today, the systems that you count on, many of those are going to change. So you need something offline that's analog that you can use to both record and analyze. You want to take note. You want to say to yourself in your notebook, here's the way my system functions today. Here's the challenges that I'm having. And then here's how I plan to solve them, right? You want to take that with you to every meeting, and you want to write down the things that people say, and you want to spend a lot of time asking questions. A vendor comes in and he says, hey, it's plus or minus 3 weeks or 6 weeks to deliver, your stuff. And you want to ask him, why is that? And then when he says, well, it's because XYZ in the process. You want to write that stuff down. You want to be observant. You want to be the most aware person in the room. You might not be the smartest, but you want to be the most aware, right? And then you see something in a seminar or on a podcast or in a magazine. You want to have one place where you're capturing all that information. And then you want to index it so that, you know, 3 months from now, when you've filled that notebook up, you can go back to the index, you can pluck it off the shelf, you know, and you can say, well, 2 months ago, I had this conversation with this guy and he said something that seemed valuable. What was that? Because some people will say, well, I've got these applications, that I use, or it's in my email, right? So here's my question to you. How many computers have you gone through? Yeah, I mean, for me, it's whatever it is, 7 computers, 10 computers between laptops and towers. I mean, and a lot of the things that I had in my email are gone, right? Some of them, like the hard drive crashed, right? So I can't even retrieve what was in there. And then some of the stuff that you put within applications, right? They're like, oh, they're going to data mine it, or it was free, but now they're going to charge you, you know? Or they've decided that it wasn't making money, and so now they're gonna, close the company, and all the data that you had in there is lost.
Yep. Yep. You can't ever, like, that's one thing I said earlier, is you can always count on change, and change is, it's usually not with your permission.
Absolutely not. So you wanna create a system, that surrounds everything else. You've got your business, and it has its own systems inside that, but you wanna create systems for yourself. You want to create systems for how you capture information. You want to create systems for how you document information. You want to create systems for how you follow up.
You were talking the other day about just general curiosity. Be curious.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Just be curious. Be curious. So I went back to my, after our conversation, I went back to my archives of the things I talk about all the time, and I have a system for that. It's able, always be learning and experimenting.
Yes, absolutely.
And my team, Kaitan, will tell you, is we've done some experiments just recently that were complete and catastrophic failures, but we learned a lot from the process, and we're like, well, we will never try this again in this way, but we found a better tool, and now we're using that tool. And so we're always be learning and experimenting, because if you're not trying anything, you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so this is kind of funny, or maybe not, but I really like change for other people. I like to go in and change, their digital footprint, or change how they lay out their company, or change their standard work, and just say, well, guys, it's part of the program. Having said that, I always wear blue shirts. All my shirts have some sort of blue in them, so it's very easy to match them to my pants, right? My wife will tell you, I always like to eat the same thing. I would eat the same thing 5 days a week, 7 days a week for dinner, and not bat an eye. I always eat the same thing for breakfast. I like to take the same route to the office, right? But I hold all those things constant because, within my work, the volume of change and the pace of change is so rapid. It's almost like my brain is a hard drive, and I'm constantly running updates, right? Like, you probably feel that way. Like, what you studied in college, right? I mean, you're a mechanical engineer, industrial engineer, right? Yeah. So you'd say, well, so how much of what you learned in school do you apply?
Not much anymore. I've had to learn new things in order to adapt to the market demands.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like you're a completely different person, right? Um, uh, um, and my degree in college was in Spanish, right? And then I had the systems engineering track, because military academy forces everybody to take engineering courses. How much of my Spanish do I use? Almost none, I can promise you. But it's a process of taking what I hear and learn and translating it. So in that way, I still use what I learned, right? But it's just all so different.
Yeah. And like change for ourselves, learning new things, testing new things, and applying those new learned knowledges to new customer engagements and through sometimes experience and sometimes like, hey, let's reflect. Can we test this? What can we learn from it? Well, thank you, Torrance, for sharing all your wonderful insights and your journey. We really appreciate you contributing and sharing your stories and experiences. We invite all of our guests to follow us and subscribe on our YouTube channel, ECIC TV, also on Spotify. And we thank you guys for listening today, and stay tuned for the next episode.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you setting aside the time. So this is very valuable.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure having you.